This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, 3 days after returning from abroad, President Rodrigo Duterte calls for a press conference amid burning economic and political issues that won't go away. A Makati Regional Trial Court won't issue an arrest warrant or hold departure order for Senator Antonio Trillanes until the Supreme Court decides on the amnesty petition of the embattled lawmaker. And the country's first model to walk the Victoria's Secret runway sparks a debate on what Filipino beauty really means. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque said President Duterte will hold a press conference tomorrow, but Roque had no further information on what the topic would be. Based on his official schedule tomorrow, Mr. Duterte will have a press briefing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, he announced in Davao that he wants to speak to the nation, and if I'm not mistaken, it is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon.
What could possibly be the agenda or topics that he would want to talk about?
That's tomorrow. Let's wait for tomorrow.
The president returned to the country on Saturday from his official visits to Israel and Jordan last week. The press conference comes amid soaring inflation, falling economic growth, controversies over tax reforms, the voiding of the amnesty granted to Trillanes, and speculation about martial law and destabilization efforts. Tune in to CNN Philippines for the live and in-depth coverage of the event tomorrow. Now, amid public concerns over the lack of cheap rice and the continuing increase of prices of goods and services, agriculture officials say they expect prices of commercial rice to stabilize in the next 2 months. CN Arcangel also tells us economic managers denied a proposal to impose a price ceiling on rice.
The Agriculture Department expects prices of commercial rice to stabilize by November as supply increases due to the start of the harvest season. But Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol says consumers should not expect rice prices to go down below 40 pesos per kilo.
Rice prices will stabilize by November this year. Pero hindi na po bababa ng 40. Masa na paga 40, siguro 42. Kasi mataatong bilihan ng palay ng mga farmers.
While Piñol insists there's no rice shortage, he says speculation about supply has led to higher farm gate prices for palay or unmilled rice. From an average price of 19 pesos per kilo last year, palay is now sold for as high as 29 pesos per kilo. Senator Cynthia Villar wants the DA to impose a price ceiling on rice to prevent traders from taking advantage of consumers. Piñol says economic managers shot the proposal down.
I actually presented this, ma'am, as we have discussed in your office. I actually presented this to the econ managers during the last meeting of the Economic Development Cluster. But the econ managers actually rejected the idea. And they said that it's not going to work.
Piñol blames the economic manager's low regard for agriculture for the DA's budget cut, which he warns will affect agriculture projects for next year. The Department of Budget and Management proposed a budget of 55.9 billion pesos for the DA next year, which is 10% lower than its current budget of 62.5 billion pesos.
Pagkasabi niya ata parang rice production is not among the priority programs. No? I actually talked to Secretary Pernia about this. Ang sabi ko, sana huwag yung ganong statements kasi nakaka-discourage eh.
To bring rice prices down, Malacanang says it is eyeing the appointment of a customs official who will focus on signing and approving import permits for rice. The palace says the appointment will prevent delays in rice importation.
Kasi naaantala yung importation kasi minsan yung pumipirma kasama ng chairman ng customs, no? So natatambak o na hindi napipirmahan yung mga import permits.
Villar urges the DA to shift its focus on mechanizing rice production to help farmers achieve higher yield at a lower cost. She says the Philippine Rice Research Institute should also share its technology to farmers instead of offering it to big companies.
Wala nang batang gusto mag-plant. Ngayon, kung i-mechanize natin, baka bumalik sila. Kasi hindi naman sila magpa-plant, magpapatakbo sila ng makina. Field Rice should teach them how to produce these inbred seeds. Na sila ang gagawa, ibibigay lang natin yung learning, yung technology.
Piñol says he's hoping the issues on rice will be a wake-up call for the government to realize that agriculture is an important sector that needs funding and attention. CN Arcangel, CNN Philippines.
Marikina Representative Miro Kimbo, together with some other congressmen, are pushing for the removal of excise tax on fuel to help alleviate rising consumer prices. In a bill filed at the lower house, Kimbo explains the tax reform package or train law has raised excise tax on kerosene to 4 pesos and diesel to 4 pesos and 50 centavos. The measure also seeks to automatically suspend the fuel excise tax increases whenever inflation in a given quarter exceeds the government's quarterly target. Kimbo adds there are now 5 million new poor Filipinos as food prices have risen to 20%. And this is contrary to what the economic managers are saying, that the train law has minimal effect on inflation.
Their estimation of 0.4 to 0.6 as the impact on inflation on prices is absolutely untrue. You find no base in it. Kung sila ay namamalengke, ramdam nila na hindi yun totoo. Kung ang galunggong ay nagtaas na ng halos 40%, ang bigas nagtaas ng 25%, ang gulay ay nagtaas ng 70%.
Deputy Speaker Raneo Abu, however, doubts if the measure will get approved at the lower house, while Ako Bicol Party List Representative Rodel Batocabe believes removing the excise taxes on kerosene and diesel will hurt the government's infrastructure program.
Alam mo, ang knee-jerk reaction ng politiko para maging gwapo ka, ay alisin natin yung excise tax. Yung sa train 1 po, nakalagay na po doon ang lahat ng safety nets. Ang kailangan lang po i-implement. But we cannot just implement them in just one setting. So tuloy-tuloy po yan.
Consumers are bearing the brunt of high prices of basic goods. Our Tristan Nodalo asked some of them how they cope with the situation.
All is set for Gina Israel's family lunch and dinner. But unlike before, Israel says she's having a hard time preparing food on their table.
Talagang nahihirapan po kasi lahat po nagmamahalan. Pati nga po yung bigas, kabibili lang ng 47, bukas makalawa, 52 na po.
A mother of 3, Israel tries to make ends meet by adjusting their daily budget of 500 pesos to cover food, school allowances, and bills.
Yung halagang 1,000, medyo marami-rami na pong napapamili. Ngayon po, hindi po ganong karami yung napapamili kasi sa dami po. Sa taas po ng mga bilihin po.
Israel reveals some of her tipid tips. From 5 kilos of rice, she now buys 3 kilos. Her budget for 1 meal should now stretch to cover 2 meals. They also consciously conserve water and electricity to save money.
Hindi po ako gumagamit ng kuryente. Instead na magagamit po ako ng kuryente, namamaypay na lang po ako. Pati po sa tubig, yung ginagawa ko po, yung pinapaligo po namin, iniipon po namin.
The Israel family story is no different from those of other consumers in this public market. 80-year-old Loretta Fernandez says the recent spike in prices of goods is one of the worst she has experienced.
Ngayon lang ako nakaranas ng ganito.
Okay. Ilan taon na po ba kayo?
80 na.
Okay.
Pero talagang pahirap na pahirap ang buhay. Bibiliin mo, gulay lang. Noon, ang gulay, makabili ka na 10 piso. Ngayon, ako, desko, 80, 100.
And just like Israel, Fernandez also thinks of ways to survive daily.
Nagtitinda-tinda ako sa umaga ng ng almusal para makasurvive din.
As consumer prices hit a new 9-year high in August, consumers may have no choice but to buy less from their budget list. Some of us may have to adjust our spending habits in order to make ends meet. But the question remains, how long will consumers bear the burden? Economist and House Committee on Economic Affairs Vice Chairman Joey Salceda believes the government is doing enough and the problem posed by soaring inflation will ease up in the coming months.
We can start seeing that 6.4 start to fall. Actually, this September, magsi 6.1 na lang yan. Bababa po yung inflation. Numerically, it will be the same price levels.
Consumers are waiting for government solutions to take effect. In the meantime, new habits of thrift, creative budgeting, and loads of patience will have to save the day. Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
We now go above and beyond the headlines as we speak with Finance Assistant Secretary Tony Lambino. Assistant Secretary Lambino, good evening and welcome to Newsnight.
Good evening, Pia. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, you know, with inflation rate at 6.4%, well, some people are saying we can expect that to go up. Very high prices of almost everything, including vegetables. A lot of people are getting very concerned about what's going on. Asik Lambino, did economic managers miscalculate things? Although we know that there are many factors that go into this, but was there a miscalculation, you think?
Well, the items in the commodity basket that were expected to go up really did go up, and there have been several estimates that have shown that the peak of our inflation will really happen in the third quarter of this year. So those things we got right. In terms of the actual point estimate for inflation, you may recall that the estimate was lower than what actually came up from the PMA data. So we are at 6.4. The target range is 2 to 4%, and our year-to-date is 4.8%, which is slightly lower than the revised estimate of 4.9 for the year. Now, given that we've hit the peak quarter for inflation, and people are feeling the higher prices, we also looked at where the higher prices are really being felt, and we saw that in the food commodity group, that's where inflation really accelerated versus the non-food group. That is why the economic team with the Department of Agriculture and other agencies came together to come up with a list of immediate actions that will address food inflation.
Yeah, but Asik Lambino, when did you come together to come up with those list of measures?
This was on the same day that the number was released for August of 2018.
Last Tuesday. However, many people would observe that shouldn't you have foreseen the impact, very strong impact that would have on, poor people. I mean, for some of us, an increase of 5, 10, 15, 20 pesos is not very much, but for very poor people, that is quite a big thing in terms of, for example, pamasahe, it takes away from certain things.
Exactly, and in fact, because of those factors, even within the train law, which does have a contribution to the inflation number, although it's not as large or all-encompassing as many people think. But that's why in the train law, the social mitigation measures were included. The unconditional cash transfers for 10 million beneficiaries, 7 million of the poorest households, and 3 million social pensioners, indigent senior citizens, as well as the Pantawid Pasada program to help those who use public transport, particularly public utility jeeps.
Okay, so Pantawid program, etc. But this is, of course, money that's given to them. But apart from that, what else can we do? Like, for example, just a while ago we had that story about rice prices, and ang sinasabi na nga we expect that the prices of rice will stabilize in 2 months, that's by November. Pero September pa lang tayo. What are we saying? Na tataas pa yan? At hindi na, like Manny Piño was saying, hindi na yan bababa ng 40. So ano to, para bang masanay, in other words, masanay na lang tayo na pataas ng pataas ang presyo? Ganun ba yun?
Yeah, we really need to address rice prices. And for months, the economic team has been advocating for the passage of the rice tariffication bill. Actually, in the lower house, this has already passed, and it's now in the Senate committee. What the rice tariffication bill will do is take advantage of the price differential between the Philippines and other rice-producing countries that are able to produce rice at a much lower price, almost half, actually. So what we will do through the rice tariffication bill is make importation easier, and we will be able to bring in cheaper rice, but put a tariff on it so that we can also collect revenues to support our farmers, either to become more productive or to shift to higher value crops, as the case may be. So rice tariffication is one. But in terms of the immediate things that we will do on rice, 4.6 million sacks of rice in NFA warehouses will be immediately released to the market across the country. There are 7 million sacks that are arriving over the next 2 months. The NFA Council authorized an importation of 5 million more for early next year. And as we know, Zamboanga, Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi were hit hard by higher rice prices. 2.7 million sacks have been allocated for Zambasulta. And the harvest has also started in many parts of the country. So those are some of the initiatives. In addition to that, the economic team, including the Department of Agriculture, PTI, and other agencies, have agreed to recommend to the President the issuance of a directive to simplify licensing procedures for rice imports. Again, if I may repeat, to urge the Senate to pass the rice tariffication bill into law this month.
All right. Well, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Finance, Tony Lambino, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you very much.
We appreciate all your online comments on our top stories tonight. Keep them coming to our pages at CNN Philippines. We're also live right now on Facebook. This is Newsnight on CNN Philippines. The fate of Senator Sonny Trillanes is ultimately up to the Supreme Court. The question, whether or not President Duterte's move to void the amnesty granted to Trillanes by former President Noynoy Aquino is valid. Makati Regional Trial Court Branch 150 is waiting for the High Court's decision before acting on a rebellion case against the senator. The Justice Department is asking the lower court to issue an alias warrant and hold a partial order against Trillanes. The senator reacted to the court's announcement this afternoon.
It's a welcome development also dahil lumalabas dito na talagang doubtful at the very least yung proclamation na ito, kaya hindi sinusunod even ng lower courts.
A separate coup d'etat case against Trillanes is also pending at the Makati RTC Branch 148. The judges handling both the rebellion and coup d'etat cases have set hearings later this week, to listen to the senator's side. Meantime, the Armed Forces has also deferred its court-martial procedures pending the Supreme Court ruling. Malacanang now looking at another ground to void the amnesty granted to Senator Trillanes by former President Aquino. That's after the palace claimed earlier that the former mutineer did not comply with the requirements for an amnesty. Our senior correspondent, Ina Andolong, reports.
Malacanang initially identified two reasons why Senator Antonio Trillanes' amnesty should be voided. Trillanes' alleged failure to properly apply for the amnesty and alleged failure to admit guilt to the coup charges he was facing. Now Malacanang is pointing to what it believes is another flaw in the amnesty.
An amnesty must be personally granted by the President. It cannot be further delegated to other officials.
President Duterte earlier mentioned this when he hit former Defense Secretary Voltaire Gazmin for recommending the amnesty and approving the same.
Bakit ka pa mag-recommend kung ikaw lang pala ang pipirma, diretso ka na? So, what's the crime of boards? Sabihin ko siya, usurpation of authority. Lahat yan sila may tama dyan.
Trillanes sees nothing wrong with this.
In any public document na kinukuha mo, yung designated na pipirma, whether administering officer yan, basta dinelegate sa kanya yung authority na yon, sa kanya na yon. So, the amnesty was given by President Aquino. Maliwanag yan. Definitely not. Definitely not.
The Constitution says the President shall have the power to grant amnesty with the concurrence of Congress. There's no mention about delegating this authority. Trillanes' amnesty stemmed from Proclamation 75 issued by then-President Noynoy Aquino. It granted amnesty to all active and former military and police officials who took part in the 2003 Oakwood Mutiny, 2006 Marine Standoff, and 2007 Manila Peninsula Siege. Section 2 says those who want amnesty may apply with the Defense Department, which was then tasked to receive and process the applications and determine who are entitled to amnesty. And then came this letter from Gazmin, sent to former President Aquino. Here he said 38 officers and 53 enlisted personnel have filed applications for amnesty with the DND Ad Hoc Amnesty Committee. He went on to say that the committee found the applications to be in order and that the applicants qualified for amnesty. Given these, he approved the ad hoc committee's recommendation, thereby granting amnesty to those who applied. This issue was not raised by Solicitor General Jose Calida, who the president says researched on Trillanes' amnesty. Proclamation 572, which sought to void Trillanes' amnesty, didn't mention it as well. But the palace expects the matter to be tackled in the Supreme Court, which is now studying the legality of President Duterte's order.
I'm sure the government will be given an opportunity to file its comment, and in the comment, lahat na po yung basihan kung bakit sa tingin ng gobyerno null and void ab initio yung amnesty will be invoked by the Republic.
Malacanang admits this matter could affect, perhaps also void, amnesty given to other former mutineers. But for now, it seems they have their eyes set on Trillanes.
May basihan naman po siya sa yung tumayong leader ng mga Oakwood mutineers.
Ina Andolong, CNN Philippines.
The U.S. Open fined Serena Williams $17,000 for 3 violations during her loss in the women's singles final. The 23-time Grand Slam champion lost to Japan's Naomi Osaka in straight sets Saturday in a championship match that saw Williams call the umpire a thief. The heated dispute is the latest controversy involving Williams in recent months. CNN's Andy Scholes tells us more.